to another episode of Skomer Live. I'm Lizzie Daly and I am super excited to be coming to you live here from Cardiff to bring you on a wee journey to one of the most wild islands we have here in the UK and off of Wales. It is, of course, Skomer Island. And we have another episode full to the brim with wildlife highlights and updates and Q&As with the wardens. We've got puffins, we've got live cameras, we've got updates, plenty of chicks on Skomer Island right now. And also we have a live guest, Mark Burton, because it's the 30th anniversary of the Skomer Marine Nature Reserve. So it's an incredibly important year and we'd like to celebrate it, celebrate the island and all the life around it in the waters as well. Now, we're about an hour off a yellow warning system for weather. So I'm fingers crossed that it doesn't start raining and thunder and lightning all around me. But if it does, it's all part of the live experience. And I'm actually quite keen to chat to the wardens about that and see whether they've got any rain right now, whether they're outside or inside. We'll find out very shortly. But before we do, each week I give you a little bit of a challenge. Last week we were looking at the evolution of guillemot eggs with some fantastic, with Professor Tim Burkhead on talking about the guillemot eggs, and we were just talking about the variety as well. So we gave you a bit of a guess the egg. Well, this week we've got guess the bill. Dun dun dun. So here are three pictures. Have a look at this first picture of a dark, quite plain bill, if you like. What species is this? Now, think about what you're looking at. We could talk about beaks and bills and rostrums all day long. There's such a huge variety. But think about the function of a bill. They serve a purpose for so many different things. So have a look. There's a very dark plain one. That's picture one. Picture two, very different. Bright red, a lot longer. And as I said, what does a bill do? Primarily, it's for feeding, right? But it's for so many other things as well. For nest building, for defending itself, as a display, maybe for climbing, for actually tearing apart its prey. So many different uses. So think about what a long red bill could be for. What kind of food is that bird eating? And the final one, have a look at this. Okay, some quite apparent nostrils there, you can see. A lot shorter than our bill number two. Have a bit of a think about what environment you might find it in, and have a guess and let us know in the comments below. And do not forget to get your questions into the wardens as well. Now, before we go over to them, I'd just like to remind you that we've been running for 10 weeks now. It's been an incredible experience. We're following the lives of the wardens on the island, as well as all the wildlife as well. But this is a series we've partnered with the Wildlife Trust of South and West Wales, and it's a series really to not only celebrate the wildlife, but to support those that are working so hard to protect it on the island. So don't forget, there's a banner at the bottom. Please do go and show your support. Donate a little bit of money and help the island keep alive. And alive it is, because there is a lot going on in June as we are right in the middle of the breeding season. To tell us more about it, I am so excited to bring back Nathan and Sylvia. Hello.
Hello.
I think you honestly brighten up my week every week seeing you, and you're outside today. How's the weather?
Although it feels like it's about to rain, genuinely. Like we might need to run in any minute.
I told you, the yellow warning system, it's happening.
Yeah.
Now, you sent us a whole list of updates. There's a lot going on. Let's start off with the first one. It's a lovely oyster catcher chick and a parent. And I love this clip because it's a really good example of teaching, isn't it, from the parent to that chick. Tell us more about it.
Yeah. Well, we often get asked this year how things have been different this year with not many people on the island, just us. And one thing that is different is that the oyster catchers seem to be on the paths a bit more. So we're coming across the chicks a bit more, and they're sort of just walking around on the path. So that's been one change. But that's one of the monitorings that we do on the island. So we're out mapping territories and nests, if we can, of oyster catchers.
Yeah, and there's about 65 pairs on the island this year. And yeah, it's just really nice to see them running around and to watch them feeding together with the parents. And you can very clearly see in the video that the parent, the adult, is showing it how to probe and also helping a little bit to get the food from the soil, which is really nice.
Absolutely fabulous. And off air, we were talking about chick survival, which usually kind of plummets from about 3 or 4 to 1 or 2. And it's a really lovely clip. I mean, to actually watch that chick not actually feeding, if you take a closer look at the clip, but actually just waiting for the parent to release some soil, make it loose, and off they go. Brilliant. What else? We've got more chicks. You sent us a lovely clip of a herring gull. 3 chicks there in a really lovely location. You must be stuffed right now with gull chicks all over the island.
Yeah, there's plenty around, and they're coming out. So now that they grow slightly bigger, they're more eager to come out and then look around and stick like close to the parents still, but just to explore the surroundings a little bit more. Of course, they're on the lookout all the time for the predators, and so we're actually very happy that those herring gulls are still. They're breeding in the exact same spot and nesting in the exact same spot as last year, right next to the boat shed. 2 chicks fledged last year. There are 3 currently there, still growing, still there. Really hopeful that all those 3 will fledge. And interestingly, there's another pair very close to them actually, also with 3 chicks. So we will see, we'll monitor and see what happens. But they're quite exposed there, to be honest. There's quite a few great blabber gulls around, and there have been peregrines around at some point as well. So yeah, very interesting to see that there's still 3 present.
And on top of that, let's not forget the amazing colonies of seabirds you've got. I saw a picture of a puffling that you posted, which is incredible. But the razorbill chicks as well, you sent us a lovely clip of them, and they are very much growing and fast.
They are, yeah. So many of them are now chicks rather than eggs, but there are still some eggs. And once they reach 15 days old, which some of them are rapidly approaching, if not some already are over 15 days old, they can fledge at that age, and so they can jump off of the cliffs and get called down by the dad, and then they're on the water making their peeping calls often.
We actually back from the Wig Basin just now, like an hour ago maybe. We were checking on some of the chicks and adults, measuring them and weighing, just looking at the condition. So it kind of gives you quite a lot of information about like different subcolonies in different areas on the island as to how they're developing, and give you information about the breeding success. So that's what we just did.
I think, it's hard to kind of stuff in all the updates of how many species are doing quite well on the island, but it's true, isn't it? Across many of the species, Skomer Island is so unique in that a lot of the colonies on the island are doing really, really well. And you had a really successful year for wagtails as well. We've got lovely fledgling here, busy calling and bopping around. Is this quite usual for the island to have lots of wagtail fledglings?
Yeah, there's usually 2 pairs around the farm, and then usually 1 at North Haven, and then some out and about around the island as well. So this year there was 1 sort of by the Wick, right near to me where I'm doing my razorbill monitoring, and then also 1 near to Morrie Mere as well, one of the ponds on the island near the Hyde there.
Yes, altogether I think we have 6 pairs, 5, possibly 6, because we're not really sure about 1 because we kind of just briefly saw it. But that's a good number. I don't think it's ever gone past 6 per year. So yeah, good year for them. Quite a lot of fledglings around.
Yeah. I'm just sorry, I'm a little bit distracted because I can hear the fantastic roar of guillemots behind you. It's lovely. It's really nice. We can see a little bit of activity behind you as well. And we talked about this looming weather. I'm so ready for the rain. It's coming at any point. But you on the island have also had big changeable weather. You sent this clip of a very darky, stormy day, which can mean big things for the wildlife on the island. But tell us about those weather changes. What does that mean for you?
Yeah, it's actually incredible that it was so dry for like nearly 3 months. We had barely any rain, and now it's turned into the most rainy season ever almost. No, not really. But yeah, June, we seem to be quite unlucky with Junes, to be honest. Last year was the exact same situation. We couldn't go out on the boat. We couldn't do any counts because it was either rainy or windy. And in fact, that's what happened yesterday. We went out on the boat, checked the weather, everything was perfect consi. No rain forecasted. We went out and then we just completely soaked. So yeah, you can't tell. Like, you check the weather, you check different websites, and it's like Skomer has its own microclimate, and no matter what forecast you get, it's just always different.
Yeah, it certainly does. And there also is Wales. Wales likes to just do what it wants, I think. But actually, you talk about that really dry season and then that extreme amount of rain, that can be really troubling for especially a lot of the burrow species and cause the potential risk of flooding. You've got some clips here of what it's like in a wet scenario. We've got dry soil. Obviously, that mixes up. And there's also a lovely clip that you sent of a very wary puffin. And I wanted to ask you, that puffin standing there with the sand eels in its mouth, looking around, obviously being a puffin on a cliff like that, it exposes it to potential predators stealing the food. But is that mainly because of the weather? What was that clip about?
No, so puffins, well, again, it depends. I think the one I sent is one of the breeders, so they quite wary when there are predators around, when you see gulls, they seem to be behaving slightly differently. It really depends on an individual. So most of them, of course, will shoot right into the burrow to feed their chick, but some will just hang around a little bit longer and wait just for the right moment. So this one was there for quite some time actually, and I actually watched it running into the burrow after like 3 or 4 minutes. In fact, it did stand for about 2-3 minutes, then flew off, and then came back again, and eventually made it to its burrow. So yeah, they seem to be doing that in some areas when there's a gull around, and there was a gull around. But I don't think the weather really like affects them in any way, or like rain.
Well, as you mentioned, it can affect the burrows in terms of flooding. It's not too much of an issue here on Skomer. Other islands, so the Fun Islands, they get a lot of seals going all over their islands, especially in the outer group, and that's known to compact the soil and affect the or increase flooding of burrows there due to the soil being so compacted. But it's less of an issue here, thankfully.
Yeah, last year we did have quite a lot of rain, and we did find, so we were actually checking the shearwater burrows, and some of the chicks were quite muddy, quite dirty. So yeah, like there is always that risk that the burrows are going to get flooded, of course. But it's not too bad here. We don't really want any more rain, to be fair, so we can stop for now.
Well, hopefully you don't get too affected later on today. We've got big weather heading our way, so my fingers are crossed. And of course, it's shorted owl season right now. There's plenty of activity, or there should be, from those shorted owls hunting throughout the day, and of course in crepuscular times. You've sent us some lovely clips. Have you seen lots of this activity recently?
Quite a lot. I mean, not as much. Well, again, we're so busy that we don't really have the time to even be in that area right now to watch them more closely. And the chicks should be quite big now, because we did hear them a few weeks ago, like potentially 3, maybe approaching a month now. So they will be quite large, so they're not going to be as active anymore. But we do see them around. There are definitely 2 pairs that have chicks. In fact, Alexa, so the field worker, she did see one a few days ago, I think. She saw 2 actually. They were quite far off. She couldn't get a good photo of them, but she did see the 2, and that's of 1 pair. And then we know that there were at least 2 from the other pair further north in the North Valley. So yeah, not a bad year.
Well, we'd usually expect more pairs actually. So probably the dry weather has impacted on them. Usually we have 4, maybe even 6 pairs, and as previously mentioned, it can get even higher than that going back a few more years.
Yes.
We were slightly worried that none of them would fledge, or none of them would hatch, in fact. So it's having 2 pairs being successful and 2 attempting to breed is okay. It's pretty good.
Come on then, come on, shorted owl chick footage, please. We've got a good few weeks of that. I'm waiting for the episode where we can intro a live camera with chicks of shorted owls, please. Now we have to move on quickly because there's so much to get through on this episode. We've got lots coming up. But just before you go, I mean, we've had some more shearwater burrow cam action. If you've been watching out throughout the night, you may have seen some closer footage of the shearwater in its burrow. And also, you may have heard them as well, because they are notoriously noisy in the night time, and you actually get a very lovely glimpse of that egg. So Tom, the shearwater, which you lovely people in the audience, named our egg. And our fingers are crossed, but audience, very quickly, I mean, how long do we have until that egg becomes a chick?
It should be very soon. Yeah, it should be within the next week or two.
Oh,
Yeah, we can't really tell when the egg was laid. That's the problem. Well, we sort of know. So yeah, probably within a week or two from now, hopefully.
okay. Next week. I'm not promising anything, but Nathan and Sylvia just said next week's episode is going to feature. I'm joking. Putting them in it. And also, we've had a really interesting visitor on one of our favourite cameras, the live cameras at North Haven. Here's a little clip of a puffin coming in, and you may notice a very different appearance in this individual puffin. And we've been back and forth all week talking about this individual. So, Wardens, I'll hand it over to you to explain what exactly we're looking at. But it's a beautiful non-breeding puffin, is that right?
Yeah, so initially we thought when we couldn't get a good photo or a good footage of it, good enough to tell, we initially thought that it was an old female based on some of the information that we obtained. So there is a paper out there, and there were 18 old females found while they were killed by the hunters, but we know of 18 old females which had undeveloped ovaries. And therefore couldn't get into that summer plumage anymore, because the hormonal system was just not in place anymore. And that was in the Faroes. So we initially thought that maybe that was an old female, which has been failing basically at going into the breeding plumage. But then we had a better look at the photos that we just got, like 15 minutes ago, literally, and it looks like it's actually a young bird, so an immature puffin that's coming, exploring while checking out the island, checking out the breeding site, and hopefully it will come back again next year or the year after to breed.
Yeah, and so it's still sort of retained its winter plumage, which is unusual and interesting sight. And we're hoping to get a really good photo to count the bill grooves, which can be used to work out age.
There we are. We'll keep an eye out for the lovely puffin on the North Haven cameras. Wardens, thank you so much. We'll stay there. We'll be coming back to you very shortly at the end of the episode to get those questions answered. But for now, have fun on one of the most beautiful places on the planet. We'll see you later.
See you later.
So the lovely Wardens there dishing all the information that we need, and a really interesting site that we got on North Haven. And of course, that is such a busy place at this time of year, and we have lots of highlights throughout the week about the Wick, or I should say the North Haven camp. So have a look at this highlight reel. A busy place, as you can see. There's a bit of a time lapse and lots of interesting things going on. At one point, we've got some bill clapping behaviour, some puffins moving around. We've got a shearwater here that's stuck in a burrow, and in the daytime, important to note that it is coming out in the day, which is a huge risk for a shearwater. And we've even got a herring gull attacking a rabbit there. An amazing bit of footage caught on that camera. The speed at which puffins come into these burrows is just incredible. And as Nathan and Sylvia were saying earlier, they're very wary if they're out of their burrows because they have all this food available, but they want to be heading straight into the burrow. Sometimes the wrong one, as you can see from that clip there. And they are not very not very good at landing in a very well put together way, let's say. I think that's a polite way of saying it. They're lovely, charismatic birds, but yeah, I mean, their landings are not the best. But let's head over to that live camera now, because this morning we've been watching it closely to try and see if we can actually see that non-breeding puffin, and it has been on this camera. It has been going around these burrows, and it has been just resting like a lot of the other puffins you can see right now. You can see, there's a bit of activity there. You can see all the network of burrows. It's a lovely shot there, a bit of a closer, tighter one, and we're hoping that at some point that non-breeder will pop back up over the next few hours. She's been around, and there'll be the odd scuffle with some of the other puffins who are obviously very defensive over their burrows with those pufflings inside right now. So keep an eye on that camera. What a beauty. There we are. So now, we talk about puffins quite a lot. They are the star of the island, it's fair to say. But actually, there's a part of their life, their ecology, that we don't get to see, and that's their diving behaviour. We've had some lovely footage sent to us by Jack Perks of what it's like to be a puffin and to look at a puffin underwater. There's a lovely clip there of puffin almost paddling around with its giant webbed feet, which are perfect for propelling itself under the water to go and feed on those oily fish and those sand eels and those small herring. And the guillemots as well are really efficient flyers. But think about a puffin itself and these seabirds that are not only efficient flyers, aerial flyers, but they have to be able to propel themselves underwater as well. What a trade-off. If you think about penguins as the most obvious and easy comparison, well, penguins obviously don't fly, so all of their adaptations and their strength to propel themselves through the water is invested in those muscles around their flippers and in having that upward stroke to really propel them through the water. But the puffins and the guillemots have to be able to do both. It's such an interesting thought. Puffins can dive about 60 meters below to get their food, and it's thought that they can hold their breath for about 100 to 110 seconds, so almost 2 minutes. So pretty impressive species and a pretty impressive part of their life that we rarely get to see. I've been very lucky to be in the water around Skomer Island and get to witness such an incredible behaviour. Seeing them underwater, they just look so well adapted, and they're brilliant to see. So yeah, what an incredible few flips and jack flips there. Now, speaking about the waters around Skomer Island, it is the 30th anniversary of the Skomer Marine Nature Reserve. How incredible is that? 30 years of protection. And within that protection, that means so many species, big and small, have been protected in this area. So very shortly, I'm very excited to be joined by a live guest, Mark Burton, who's going to tell us more about it. But for now, have a look at this fantastic few clips of the Marine Conservation Zone. I have to say that some of this beautiful footage was filmed by Rob Gibbs and Phil Newman. So enjoy the next 4 minutes of absolute marine bliss.
The waters surrounding Skomer have been seen as wonderfully diverse and valuable marine habitats for a long time. In 1979, a portion of the surrounding seas were made into a voluntary reserve. However, they were only officially protected as a marine nature reserve in 1990, before being reclassified as a marine conservation zone in 2014. This year, we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of the area's protection. Skomer is 15 hectares of seabed with a wide range of habitats that are representative of Southwest Wales as a whole. Because of the area's biogeography and geology, it has a huge biodiversity, including Mediterranean and northern species. Communities of life have to be resistant to the 16-metre waves and 10-knot currents that sweep the island's shores and sheltered bays. North Haven offers a great example of how the life in Skomer's waters has adapted to such harsh conditions, being home to an eelgrass bed, a vital type of marine vegetation that stops the erosion of the seafloor and keeps the water visibility clear, allowing for even more life. Skomer is home to 3 species of true coral. Of these, pink sea fans and red deadman's fingers are species usually associated with warmer waters. The island sits at the northernmost limit for the pink sea fan, so it's a real treat to see it at all. And these species just hint at why Skomer's marine habitats are so special. The Marine Conservation Zone around Skomer boasts some of the most biodiverse seed beds in the UK. Over 1,200 species have been recorded in the sediments, with around 130 species of sponge, including 2 which are currently unnamed and completely new to science. Not only this, but 78 species of sea slug can be found. That's 70% of the species list for the entire UK. These discoveries help highlight the potential for undiscovered life in the seas surrounding Wales and the rest of the United Kingdom, and have only been possible because of the area's protection from damaging forms of fishing such as dredging and beam trawling. Thanks to consistent funding from Natural Resources Wales and the Countryside Council for Wales, there is nowhere else in the UK that can match the amount of long-term data collected in Skomer's Marine Conservation Zone. With this funding and special protection, the scope for science in Skomer's water is vast, from the smallest microscopic phytoplankton all the way to the island's massive and varied cetaceans. Sediments to reefs to the notoriously harsh intertidal zones, the amount of life studied is thought to be unparalleled on such a consistent annual basis. But it's not just the life. A dedicated team of oceanographic loggers monitor the readings from a 24/7 weather station and collect data about temperature, water salinity and turbidity, and the amount of available light. The list of potential observations seems endless. The observations taken in the Marine Conservation Zone support research projects from every university within Wales and others across the entire world, some as far away as Wellington University, New Zealand. Even NASA has used data from the Marine Conservation Zone around Skomer. Combining all of this with the amazing science and conservation work done on the island's National Nature Reserve, it's possible there isn't anywhere in Europe, or potentially the world, that does everything that is achieved annually in this tiny little corner of West Wales.
Fabulous video. What a fantastic little insight into what it's like to actually dive beneath the waves around this important area that's been protected so well, and is actually a really good example of what happens when you do protect these huge areas, and what life it can bring, or at least help protect long term. Now with me live is Marine Environmental Monitoring Officer for the Natural Resources Wales, Mark Burtin. I have to say, he is coming to us live from under the waves. He's in a very scenic place right now, surrounded by coral, sea slugs and sponges as we speak. Mark, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're coming through loud and clear, Lizzie, underwater. I think this is as close as I'm going to get this year, but I'm enjoying being here anyway.
Now, Mark, I mean, just learning a little bit more about you. You have been diving around Skomer for 25 years. You've been as part of this marine conservation zone and working with that for 19 years. You really know this reserve very well. And of course, it's the 30th anniversary of this reserve. So let's jump straight into it. Tell me why this year in particular is so important, and what's happened over this 30 years to really celebrate its protection.
Well, it was designated in 1990. To be absolutely fair, you need to go back 40 years to people like Blaise Bullimore and Robin Crump, who've been setting up as a voluntary marine nature reserve even before that. But for the last 30 years since designation, CCW and Natural Resources Wales have consistently resourced us with a diving team of 4 people and a boat to go out and do I think some of the best marine monitoring in the whole of Europe, if not the world. Certainly if you combine what we do underwater on the shores with what Nathan and Sylvia and the Wildlife Trust do above the water on the seabirds and everything else there, I don't think you'll find anywhere else in the world that does as much as we do here. And it attracts a lot of people. We have an exhibition centre in Martin's Haven, and we've had nearly 390,000 people come through that in the last 30 years. And they've just seen pictures of the underwater world. If you look at the divers who've actually got wet and experienced the marine life for themselves, we've got over 55,000 divers. So that's a great interaction with the public for something that most people just don't get to see.
So come on, Mark, then. I mean, I've been touching base with you all week, and every time I chat to you, there's just a whole string of incredible things you can see. So what's your favourite thing, or a list of the best things you can see in the reserve?
Well, I just don't think people realise how biodiverse our seas are. Until you get under there, I guess you've got no idea what you could see under there. But it's just like the land, just completely filled with water, except every single square inch of rock or sediment is covered with something that is living. And a lot of the animals look like plants, but there really isn't a square inch of seabed that isn't covered. And the stuff we get in Wales, we're particularly lucky here in southwest Wales. I think we've got some of the best and pristine marine environments, which our seabirds are obviously telling us they're in a good state because they're in such a healthy state. But you can see southern species like sea fans, which are sort of behind me here. Obviously lots of colourful fish. The colours are absolutely amazing. But we also get some of the northern species, which are more sort of Scottish species, just making it down this far south. And really it's because Skomer's in such a unique biogeographical position with a mix of sedimentary rocks and volcanic rocks. We get a huge range of habitats, which gives us some really special biodiversity in such a small little area. Skomer's only about 15 hectares of actual designated seabed.
And within that, of course, you've got those 78, as was mentioned in that video, 78 species of nudibranch, of sea slug. That's just incredible. 70% of the UK's listed species, is that right?
Yeah, in fact, we found one more. I was checking with Kate yesterday, and she found another one last year, which is incredible, isn't it? We're now up to 79. That is pretty special. And sea slugs, there's actually one just resting on my shoulder. I don't know if you can see this. These are top predators. I mean, you don't think of slugs as top predators, do you? But they even eat their own babies. They are proper carnivores, and they're to the point that they can attack and eat stinging organisms like the anemones and things like that, and they can transfer those stinging cells into their serrata, which are these little bobbly bits on the back here, and they can use those for their own defense. One of the best places to see sea slugs is to actually go to Martin's Haven. So if you do dive or snorkel, I think we found over 30 species of sea slugs at Martin's Haven. So you don't even have to go all the way out to Skomer. You can paddle out to Martin's Haven and snorkel around there. Incredible habitats around Martin's Haven and lots of sea slugs. This time of year, it's just about spot on. They'll start dying off once you get to sort of July, August.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been snorkeling and diving. Snorkeling is so exciting. Even just putting your head below the water, you don't even have to, go that far, and you can be surrounded by blooms of jellyfish and spider crabs and all sorts. So absolutely fantastic. And of course, within that 30 years, there's been long-standing monitoring and research going on. So what are some of the main research projects that's come out of this reserve?
We look at everything from plankton through to the seashores, the rocky reefs, the sediment reefs, the cetaceans, the grey seals. We look at the whole ecosystem all the way through. So there's been masses of research. Again, I don't think that's rivaled anywhere else in the UK. We work with all the Welsh universities and Leeds University and Southampton University, Portsmouth University, and their students have done projects on sponges and scallops and fish and seashores, all sorts of things. We get volunteer divers to come and help us with some of the biggest projects. Kate's started a project, first of all, looking at eelgrass, and we've now expanded that to look at scallops and fish and urchins, and we'll get about 40 divers a year to come and help us do those big projects. Probably the most unusual research partner we've had was the University of North Carolina. We're working with NASA, and they wanted to look at temperatures on seashores. So we had the guy come all the way from America and put out little temperature loggers on our seashores, and then the satellites would fly over our heads and they tell us what they think the temperature was, and his loggers would say what it really was. And yeah, so we were even informing NASA what was going on the planet.
Wow. Yeah, it's a reserve that has a capacity to do pretty much everything, it seems. Now I want to talk about this because it's a very unusual, but I guess quite obvious interaction, if you like, with the life on the island and life beneath the waves. And I guess you can call it the power of poo, if you like. We talked about this yesterday, Mark. Tell us more about the impact of the guano around the diving sites.
Well, I mean, it adds a lot of nutrients, and it certainly brings a lot of planktonic life in. And then where you get lots of planktonic life and rich nutrient in sources, you do get a lot of filter feeders. There's obviously some very big sea cliffs around Skomer, and probably the most famous is the Wick. And the Wick is actually one of our most, it's our favourite dive site. One, because of the seabirds, we can't get there very often. We have to avoid it when the seabirds are on their nests, because otherwise we just disturb them, bringing the boat into such a narrow little area. So it's really only August time that we can dive it. Cliff that you can see from the land carries on another 20 meters below the water. In fact, it cuts right in underneath it. And when you dive down, you are beneath literally the whole of Skomer Island with the weight of that cliff all above your head, which is quite amazing to think about. And the life on that wall is just amazing. Sponges, we found new species to science on that particular wall in the sponges and stuff. But littering and sprinkled over all the boulders on the seabed are a tiny little true coral called the scarlet and gold cup coral, Balænophilia regia. It's about the size of your fingernail. It really is tiny. But there are thousands of them just scattered amongst the boulders. They love the surge of the Wick. They love the way the water whooshes up and down. They don't really like the strong currents of Jack Sound. They prefer the wave exposure and the wave surge from what you get in the narrow Wick Basin. So yes, you've got lots of poo raining down on your head, which might not sound brilliant, but if you actually look down instead of up, the seabed is like a golden carpet of stars beneath you. Thousands and thousands of these tiny little, and it is one of our favourite dive sites of the year. And when you surface, you come back up. I don't know if you can see these guys here, which are corals. And these are the jewel anemones, and they're in carpets of all sorts of colours. My favourite colour is the custard and purple variety.
Oh, absolutely beautiful. I think you've sold it to us, Mark, definitely. And as I mentioned, 30 years of protection. So, I mean, this year is quite significant. What would you like others to know more about this reserve and know more about your work and what this area is all about? What would be your message?
Well, I think in 30 years, we've achieved, the protection has certainly achieved a lot. Along with the designation, we got the Sea Fisheries Committee had actually banned all forms of dredging and beam trawling. And it actually also took away the ability to take scallops by any means. So the divers couldn't take them at all. We hardly had any scallops 30 years ago. They've increased sevenfold, probably eightfold now. We were going to survey them this year. They're on an exponential increase, and they've done really, really well. But perhaps even more importantly, those seabed habitats, the soft sediment habitats of muds and gravels, they've been completely left alone by any damaging activity. And we now have probably the most biodiverse seabed sediment communities anywhere in the UK or Europe. We found 1,200 species of different taxa in just the muddy gravels, which you would think were really boring, insignificant habitats, but they're probably some of the most biodiverse. And they're getting really close. 30 years of protection, you can start to get back to what was natural, if you like, whatever natural is these days. But with 30 years of protection, our communities are starting to look like they should be in an unimpacted environment.
A great example of what can come if you do actually just leave nature to do its thing. Absolutely. One last question, Mark. Where do you get your shirt from? Because that's a very light and easy outfit for diving. I've never seen anything like that before.
Very hardy. I honestly thought when I started diving years ago, we wouldn't be still faffing around with all these tanks. Surely there's something we can just stick in our mouths by this time. But I think the diving kit gets heavier every year. It doesn't seem to get any lighter.
Yeah, no, we're still not quite there yet. But if you can dive in that shirt, let me know, because yeah, it's a bit of a nightmare with all the kit. But Mark, thank you so much for coming on live. It's been lovely to chat to you, and yeah, everybody go learn more about the fantastic work of Mark Burton and the Natural Resources Wales team. Thanks, Mark.
Bye.
Oh, absolutely wonderful, and a great example exactly of what can happen if you do just leave an area protected and let wildlife take over. Fantastic. Now, one person who we have been getting reports from all over actually is Iolo Williams. I'm sure you know him. He has been the roaming host, if you like, of the show. He was working on Spring Watch, and now he's actually in Pembrokeshire, ironically. Iolo, what's going on with you?
Hello again. I'm back, unfortunately not in person. Spring Watch has come to an end. 3 fantastic, very enjoyable weeks, but this week I'm actually down in Pembrokeshire filming for BBC Wales, which is ironic really. But I understand that you're concentrating on the marine environment, and it's an important issue for all of us really, when you consider that more than 2/3 of the surface of the earth is covered in oceans. And the way that we've treated the sea over the centuries is despicable, really. We've used it as no more than a rubbish tip, just dumping everything in the sea and forgetting about it. And of course, we are now in the age where the sea is starting to throw everything back at us, whether it be toxic chemicals, plastic, whatever it is. And I never really appreciated the importance of the sea and the amazing array of wildlife there until my first dive. And I'm ashamed to say, I didn't dive until I was 40 years old. That's, I'm horrified to say now that is 17, coming on for 18 years ago. And it was off Fishguard, so it was down in Pembrokeshire, and it was only 7 metres in all. But remember, we went down below the surface into a kelp bed, and going through the kelp fronds was like going through a tropical rainforest canopy. It was just amazing watching these things going back and forth with the kind of movement of the waves. And then we dropped down a bit, and we were going down what they call a wall, which is like a steep cliff below a small guillemot colony. And because of all the whitewash, all the poo going into the water, the wall for some parts was covered in beadlet anemones, beautiful beadlet anemones, all these dazzling little anemones there. It was just stunning. It was absolutely stunning. And then we went down, finally reached the bed, and that was an eye-opener too, because I remember I gently touched the bed and put up a flatfish of some sort that I hadn't seen. There were velvet swimming crabs, there were edible crabs, there were lobsters, there were sea slugs down there. Remember, we had sea cucumbers down there. It was just a real eye-opener, you know, just the wealth of it. And when you consider that just offshore from there and a little bit north in Cardigan Bay, we're now allowing people to scallop dredge, which basically means plough the bottom of the sea. It's disgusting. If this happened on land, it would be akin to us ploughing up a hay meadow. You know, there'd be massive outcry, but because it's out of sight, out of mind, very few people care about it, and it's such a shame. And it's really sad when you think we've only got one marine nature reserve in Wales. Thankfully, it's Skomer, Stockholm, part of the mainland, Mallows mainland there, but just one. When you think of places like the Gower, the whole of Pembrokeshire, Cardigan Bay, the Llyn Peninsula, Bardsey Island, then we've got Anglesey, we've got the Great Orme, all these fantastic areas above and below the waves. It's tragic, really, it's a travesty. So I think that in future we really need to back up. We need to look after our oceans, and governments need to step up to the mark as well. You know, we need more marine nature reserves for the sake of the ocean, for the sake of ourselves, really, for the sake of the future of this planet. It's rather a serious video you've had off me this week, but the sea is that important that we must look after it. Okay, take care, and hopefully I'll see you next week.
Yeah, and Iolo talks about the diving sites around Skomer and how brilliant they are there as well. Where, yeah, just absolutely fantastic reserve and area that needs to be protected. And he's spot on with the tone. We need to do better. If you protect an area from dredging, then it will recover, it will flourish. And obviously our oceans are facing a number of issues. The other issue, of course, is plastic, which is a global issue and is one that we now know a lot more about. But plastic can come in many different forms and have many different impacts on our marine environment. So here is Lisa to tell us more from the Living Seas Wales team. Tell us more about an island a little bit further offshore. It's called Grasholm Island. It's covered in gannets. I've been many times. It is a beautiful island, but unfortunately it also faces the impacts of plastics.
So I wanted to tell you about a problem we have with plastic pollution on another of our Pembrokeshire islands, and that island is Grasholm. And it sits 11 kilometres out to the west of Skomer. And it's a tiny island, it's just 9 hectares in size, but it's home to 36,000 pairs of northern gannets. That's about 7% of the world population, and it's the only gannetry in Wales, so we're so lucky to have it in Pembrokeshire, but we also have a huge responsibility in Wales and in Pembrokeshire to look after it. We have a huge issue there with plastic, and it's mainly fisheries waste. So what happens is our male gannets, when they're nest building in the spring, they go out across the ocean and they look for nesting material, and they should be bringing back seaweed and kelp, but they also bring back netting. So they bring back monofilament fishing line and synthetic rope discarded from the fisheries industry. They select it preferentially and they deposit it in their nests, and it makes their nests bomb-proof. They build big pedestal nests that have to hold an egg and a chick for up to 5 months through the summer. And it needs to hold the egg and the chick up above all the guano and the mud and the mess that is on Grasholm, especially after it's been raining. The problem we have then is that as the adults return to incubate their egg, and as they return to feed their chick, and as their chick grows, which takes 3 months, the birds can become tangled in the plastic that's in their nest. So very often you'll see birds with their legs, their wings, sometimes their necks tangled in plastic, which is really unpleasant. And actually it's fatal to some of our birds. In the 1970s, conservationists in Pembrokeshire started to go out to Grasholm in the autumn, and they tried to remove some of the plastic. But there was so much rubbish there that over time it's just not been possible to do that. So in more recent years, teams of conservation staff from the RSPB, from Ramsey Island and from Skomer as well, so often the Skomer wardens who are still around in the autumn would join the wardens from Ramsey, and in the middle of October they go out and the team cut free birds that are tangled in their nests, and hopefully they can release lots of birds. Sometimes it's as many as 100. If they don't cut them free, the birds will be abandoned by their parents who are migrating south for winter, and unfortunately those birds, some of them quite healthy, will just starve to death. Really all we can try and do is raise the profile of and use the footage and some of the images that we take when we're there, just to raise awareness with the fisheries industry and to try and lobby for that industry to be cleaner and tidier. You do find some domestic rubbish on Grasholm, but plastic bottles and crisp packets don't really make great nests, so you don't see a huge amount of that sort of rubbish out there. but it's the line and the filaments that are really, really dangerous to gannets.
Lisa Morgan there from the Wildlife Trust of South and West Wales project, not Living Seas Wales, apologies about that, but some really important imagery there. Actually, it's quite important to actually share the realities of what is going on, and as Lisa was saying just there, it's not as easy always as just removing all the plastic. This is part of a long-term problem and we need long-term solutions, absolutely. And actually, talking about plastic comes in, as I said, many forms around our marine environment, and the Living Seas Wales team have a long history of understanding plastics and trying to better and create solutions around this issue. So here is Nia Jones from the Living Seas Wales team to tell us more about her experience with plastics on the Welsh coast.
Plastics are a huge problem for our seas. We know that every year tens of millions of tons of it still find its way into the oceans, and the problem is it never goes away. They just break down into smaller and smaller pieces. At every stage of its life in the sea, plastic is a problem for marine life. Animals get entangled in there, they may eat it, but we now know that plastic acts as a magnet for pollutants, so over time it just breaks down and becomes more and more toxic. During the winter months, this is where we start seeing the extent of the problem. Although it's only the tip of the iceberg, places like Skomer and west-facing beaches are strewn with plastics, and it's not just a localised problem. We see plastics from as far away as the east coast of America. For example, these lobster tags we can source all the way back to Newfoundland. We also find plastics from a really long time ago. For example, this fairy liquid bottle that I found a couple of years ago on the beach, we can source back to the early 60s. So plastic is not only a toxic pollutant, it's dangerous to marine life, it also persists for a really long time in our seas. So what can you do? The key thing is to reduce. Do you need plastic? Is there an alternative? Have a look through your house and have a think of some of the alternatives that there might be. And next time you go to the beach, take a bag with you and do a 2-minute beach clean.
Fairy liquid bottles from the 1960s. Just picture that for a minute. Imagine finding that on your beach. It's not an uncommon sight, but it's a scary, scary thought for sure. So these are things that we need to consider moving forward as we try and help protect these areas more and more. Now, there's an area of Skomer Island, or aspect of Skomer Island, which we haven't gone into in too much detail, but it's one that excites me. It's life in the undergrowth. And I've been chatting to entomologist, wildlife TV presenter. He's a presenter on BBC Earth, and he's an all-round naturalist and biologist. And he is a bit of an expert when it comes to beetles. So have a look at this. This is Yussef Rafik, and he tells us all about life in the undergrowth and life of beetles on Skomer Island.
Hello, I'm Yussef, and I want to talk to you about a group of animals that live on Skomer Island. But they're not necessarily the first animals that spring to mind when you think of Skomer natives. Yet their order accounts for 28% of the entire world's population of animals. I am, of course, talking about Coleoptera, or the beetles, and Skomer Island is home to a whole host of them. The first beetle of Skomer we're going to have a look at is perhaps one of the most famous of the bunch. It's the glowworm, which is kind of confusing because glowworms aren't worms, they're beetles, obviously, so there's a bit of a misleading name there. The males look like ordinary beetles, but it's the females that give this species their name. The females have no wings and look much more worm-like, and they're of course responsible for emitting that orangey green glow from their bottoms when they come out during the night. And this glow is created by a chemical reaction when a special molecule called luciferin reacts with oxygen, and it's this that gives it that incredible bioluminescence, which the females use to attract the males. Sadly, glowworms are in decline all throughout Europe, including those populations on Skomer. Studies have shown that in the last 18 years, populations in England have dropped by 75%, and that huge decline is likely due to the climate crisis. Glowworm larvae feed primarily on snails, and as we're getting hotter and drier summers, the snail numbers are reducing, so there's less food for them and they're finding it more tricky to survive. Certain types of street light can also have an impact because the males get confused during the breeding season. Add to this the fact that the females have no wings, so they find it quite hard to repopulate areas where there's been a decline, so it's quite clear to see how they've been decimated. Skomer is also home to one of my favourite beetles of all time, the dung beetle, and that's mainly because I have fond memories of chasing dung beetles around on the beaches of Morocco when I was little. But it's not just warm tropical places you can find dung beetles, you can also, believe it or not, find them in Wales. These beetles lay their eggs in deep underground tunnels, and they drag that poo back to their nest for the larvae to feed on. And it's for this reason that dung beetles play such an important role in waste management on the island. The next beetle has to have one of the best names in the entire animal kingdom. Meet the cockchafer. Cockchafers are fairly large, bulky beetles with big feathery antennae, and having feathery antennae helps to increase the surface area, which gives them almost superpower-like abilities to pick up on subtle chemical signals, whether that be a food source or a potential mate. They also provide a food source for lots of birds. Cockchafer larvae in particular are prized by corvids. If cockchafers are a little bit dull for you, this next beetle should add a splash of colour. This is the thick-legged flower beetle, given their name because the males have these incredibly chunky hind legs. This is a bug that certainly doesn't skip leg day. Not only are they wonderful to look at, thick-legged flower beetles play an important role in pollination, because these guys pollinate flowers such as oxeye daisy, bramble and cow parsley. Being a Wildlife Trust reserve, Skomer Island is a protected site, and the biosecurity measures put in place enable species to thrive here, including creepy crawlies like the beetles we've mentioned. The island has an abundance of habitat and food, and the lack of artificial light also really helps species such as the glowworm. And it's important that these little critters are protected because they have a place in the food chain and the ecosystem just like every other plant and animal on Skomer. I've always been fascinated with insects, but hopefully now you too have a greater appreciation for these curious six-legged creatures.
So there you go. I've seen cockchafers this season already as well, and dung beetles and everything else in between. Thank you so much, Yussef, for joining us here on Skomer Live. Now, let's get to those questions because we're running out of time, and lots of you have said hello from all over the world again. We love your big hello. So before I head over to the wardens, this is the list of you guys watching, taking part, supporting the series. So a massive thank you. We've got hello from Helen Hudson, Jason Davis, Annabelle Gates, Katie from Lancashire, Charlotte from Staffordshire, Garth from Sheffield. Hello from Kate Locke, Bonnie, and from Milwaukee in USA. Hello. Rebecca from Keynsham, Norma watching from a rainy Plymouth. I'm so sorry about that. Darla from Virginia, USA. We got some more comments. Keep up the amazing work, wardens. Paris Umadat said she can't wait to visit again. I know, me too. Stefan Gearan said Skomer is such an amazing place. Rosemary Bartlett said she's loving the series. Christopher Queeley, can't believe all this awesome wildlife on his doorstep. I know. This is why we put the amazing series together. It's so easy to do. Nancy Gartley is watching in the USA. She thinks it's a fabulous show. So many comments, so many hellos. Hello, hello, hello to you all. Right, let's get some of those questions answered. Our wardens are joining us right now. So we're going to launch straight into it. Lorraine J asks, how old do you think the non-breeding puffin is? And how do they find a mate?
Well, we suspect that it might be a young puffin, actually, the non-breeder. We're hoping to get a look at its bill grooves to work out how old it is via them. It's got quite a large bill. So initially we were thinking potentially it might have been an old female that had a hormonal imbalance causing it to retain its winter plumage. But we've had a slightly better look at the bill. We'd like an even better one. And yeah, we'll hopefully be able to update even more in future episodes.
Great. And it's about 3 or 4, right? That normally these young puffins after fledgling will head out to sea, stay out to sea, and then return back for that breeding season.
Yeah, exactly. So exactly like you described. So after about 3-4 years, they'll come in and they start investigating, checking the sites, and they usually start breeding at about between 5 and 7 years old.
Fantastic. Okay, we have a question from Jamie Carter, who's aged 12. Do the male and female shearwaters take it in turn to sit on the egg? Will they move out of the burrow once the chick is born and just return to feed? And there doesn't look like there's much room in the burrow for mum, dad, and chick. It's a tight squeeze, but tell us more about that.
Yes, they do alternate. So it's usually the male that incubates first, does the first stint. The female will go off a bit further north in the Irish Sea, close to the Isle of Man, and eat lots of fish, get herself into into good condition and come back and switch with the male, and they alternate sort of roughly every 8 days or so.
Yeah, and then once the chick hatches, which is usually after about 50 days, they'll be switching. They're maybe looking after the chick stints, let's call it that way, will be more regular, so they'll be switching more often until the chick becomes quite large, and then the feeding switches are going to be less frequent.
Fabulous, fabulous. Lots more questions, so we're going to plow on. Charlie Lewis asks, how often do the Skomer wardens find rubbish or conduct beach cleans on the island? Is there a problem that's increasing around the island? Obviously, it's a west-facing island, so you must get lots in the coves and caves of Skomer.
Yeah, so we always aim to do the beach clean before the seabird season starts, so we don't disturb them while they're on their nests and incubating. So we'll aim to do a beach clean usually like at the beginning of April, ideally, and then sometimes towards the end of the season as well, if we can. And unfortunately, the rubbish just keeps coming in. I mean, we do try and get it ready for the season and clean it up and to reduce the amount of rubbish that's accumulates over time, especially after winter. Wow, you can come out and watch those beaches, and yeah, they can get quite dirty. I wouldn't say that it's increasing. It's kind of at the constant level. Storms can be quite well, they can change the accumulation of that rubbish quite significantly. We've had quite a few last year, and yeah, there was a lot more compared to some previous months or previous years.
Fabulous. Okay, so I guess an ongoing issue, really, isn't it? Plastic. It's a long-term solution that we have to find and be able to fix that problem. So a question from Rachel. Really interesting beetles feature. Where on Skomer is the best place to find glowworms? Is there a particular area that they favour? Now, Skomer Island obviously is free of pesticides, etc. But do they have a specific habitat or part of the island where they congregate the most?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen that many, to be fair. I think they often seen around the farm and in North Valley. I think some have said they've seen them in the west somewhere as well, like closer to Amos, I think, at some point. But I'm not sure if they've got a favorite sort of part of the island. They've been seen in different places.
Yeah, I guess they can be found from anywhere in hedgerows and under rocks even as
yeah,
well. Yeah, definitely. A few more comments come in. Really lovely comments. Dave Porritt is watching in London, and he says, thanks WTFWW. Skomer Live is the next best thing to being on the island, and I totally agree. Christine Jones loved Iolo's update, and yes, we must do more to protect the marine environment. And you guys on the island are the ones that continue to protect the wildlife there, continue the research. So a massive thank you to you for taking the time every week to keep us updated, because we love it. So a massive thank you to you. And what's next this week? I'm guessing you're about to batten down the hatches for a big storm?
Yeah, a bit. It's mainly ongoing, so similar things. So yeah, still doing the counting of cliff nesting birds. Got to get that done soon before the 21st. We need to get them finished. And then, yeah, ringing and measuring of chicks, getting their wing lengths and their weights. Yeah, productivity monitoring.
Wait, sorry, I'm so sorry, Nathan. I just jumped in. The tree sparrows. Tell us about the tree sparrows.
Yeah, it's exciting news. I mean, we did mention the tree sparrows in one of the earliest episodes, and we said that there were two hanging around. They're still here. They're at the farm in one of the house martin nest boxes, and we're very hopeful to see them breed. And they are. How amazing! So we have seen them going in and feeding their young. And so it's very exciting because they haven't bred on this island since the late 60s. This is the first time since the late 60s. Absolutely incredible.
Fantastic. 60 plus years, is it? Or 60 years since they've been on Skomer Island. 2020 is the year. This is fantastic. I'm so sorry for cutting you off there, Nathan. It just sprung into my brain very quickly. Thank you so much as ever, and we'll see you next week for the same.
See you next week.
Excellent. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
So exciting. You know, a few episodes ago we were just saying, could it be the year? And you never know with this kind of thing, but it's happening. So hopefully the wardens can get us some nice shots for next week, maybe. Wink, wink, if they're still listening. Right, that's all we've got time for today. It's an hour. It's already gone. It absolutely flown by. Thank you all for tuning in today. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. And please do continue to support the Wildlife Trust of South and West Wales. And before I go, I have to reveal what those bills were at the beginning of the episode. If you remember, we showed you 3 pictures. Now, very quickly, let me show you. The first one was, of course, it was a puffin, or puffling, I should say. That bright bill that they have in those breeding months obviously is lost outside of the breeding months, as we talked about with that non-breeding puffin that's arrived on the island. But this is of a puffling. So great first bill there, followed by picture number 2, which is, of course, a chuff. An unmistakable bill, along with their bright red legs and that lovely kind of curved long bill. Fantastic, fantastic corvid, and one that we're very lucky to have in the big numbers around here in Wales. And the final one is a little ringed plover. So there you go. The 9th recorded just a few weeks ago. We featured a photo of a little ringed plover on the island. The 9th only ever recorded on Skomer Island. So fantastic to see those lovely birds all around Skomer Island. And that's all we've got time for. Please do get in touch. Let us know if you've enjoyed this episode. Next week, we're not really sure what we're going to be featuring yet, but I promise you it's not going to be one to miss. There'll be live guests, more live chats with the wardens, and of course, lots of wildlife too. We'll see you again on Skomer Live. Bye.